MOSAIC, a daily news program from Link TV, presents a selection of news reports from independent and state-controlled broadcasters from throughout the Middle East.
The U.S. Secretary of State concluded her visit to Egypt, where she criticized the imposition of emergency laws, the random violence, and collective punishment committed against peaceful demonstrators that were calling on the Egyptian government to restore its confidence in the people. Rice said that the Egyptian election this year must adhere to the laws drafted for a fair and accurate election, and international observers must be present without any restrictions. Rice also met with some opposition leaders, which is unique because it is the first time an American official has met with opposition leaders. Something has changed with the U.S. diplomacy regarding democracy and political reforms in the Middle East. All of a sudden, the harsh U.S. language and threatening statements have disappeared, and the tone has become quieter and calmer. The change in the way the U.S. is dealing with Egypt regarding democracy is not a change in U.S. policy regarding reforms, but it is an outcome of the lessons learned from the Iraqi war. The U.S. realized that it is impossible to repeat its experience in Iraq. The U.S. will continue its pressure on Egypt to implement reforms, but it will do so in small doses in order to prevent the pain of such a change. Egypt is a good candidate to experiment on to find out the results and side effects of such a new position for reforms. It was obvious that the Secretary of State didn't criticize Cairo directly to avoid embarrassing the Egyptian regime, even though the Egyptian streets are boiling over with events that have never been seen before. The reasons behind the recent change in the American tone are due to the realization of the U.S. that Egypt is the gateway to reform in the Middle East.
President Mubarak opened the door to change, but the Egyptian government should restore its confidence in the people. We're all concerned about the future of reforms in Egypt, and the rights of those who are peacefully calling for democracy must not be violated. One day democracy will prevail, and the emergency laws will disappear, and the common laws of the legal system will replace the present injustice.
The Egyptian experiment has been successful in removing the justification that some Arab leaders have been using to avoid reforms and democracy, claiming that such changes will bring militants, Islamists, and fanatics to power. The U.S. has chosen the path of democracy to restore stability to the Middle East to defeat the militants. The difference in the ideologies of different groups and parties is an important factor in implementing democracy. However, the U.S. is refusing to allow some groups, such as Hamas and Hezbollah, to take part in the political process, which is a contradiction on the part of the U.S. administration. They are worried that the two groups are trying to join forces in secret meetings and are sometimes seen together in public with European officials. Despite the drifting of the U.S. from its policies, there are some U.S. foreign policies that will not change whatsoever, such as their hatred and anger towards Syria. As Syria's neighbors choose the path of democracy, Syria is refusing to bow and is indeed resisting change. However, such resilience could put them in a position where their nails will be clipped next. The only reason Syria is being spared now is because of the turmoil and unrest that is taking place in Iraq. As far as Iran is concerned, the U.S. view the Iranian regime as illegitimate, and the recent presidential election is only an attempt by Iran to mislead all concerned parties.
Former Former Lebanese communist leader George Hawi was killed in a Beirut bomb blast, hot on the heels of parliamentary elections. The bomb was apparently placed under the passenger seat of Hawi's Mercedes car and was detonated by remote control. The driver apparently escaped serious injuries. President Emil Lahoud condemned the assassination, saying it was part of a conspiracy to destabilize Lebanon, hours after the international community voiced a vote of confidence in the country's legislative polls. Prime Minister Najib Mikati, who had just tendered his resignation following the election, urged caretaker ministers to expedite the investigation into the blast and to request foreign assistance. The UN, the FBI and French police are already helping probe a series of deadly bombings. Press reports said the FBI already surveyed the scene of today's blast. Opposition Democratic Left leader Ilyas Attallah said he had no doubts Hawi's killing was the work of the, quote, Syrian Lebanese intelligence apparatus, echoing charges that Damascus agents stayed on after the April troop pullout. Meanwhile, the United Nations announced that German prosecutor Detlef Melis, who is mandated with probing Hariri's murder, interrogated Presidential Guard's chief Mustafa Hamdan and ordered a search of his home and office. He is the only serving pro-Syrian security chief not to be sacked. UN staff went to Colonel Hamdan's house and office to pick him up. Sarah Khouri has more on George Hawi's killing.
The veteran anti-Syrian politician was killed in his car, close to his home in the working class Wata MOSAIC neighborhood near the city center at 10 a.m. The blast occurred the day after official results gave the main anti-Damascus opposition victory in the 4-round elections and followed a string of previous attacks in Lebanon since February. On June 2nd, prominent anti-Syrian journalist Amir Kassir was killed when a bomb exploded under his car in Beirut in an attack blamed on the pro-Syrian regime. The neighborhood where George Hawi lived is largely Muslim and comes months after slain Prime Minister Rafik Hariri was killed in a massive Beirut bombing in February. Justice Minister Khaled Kabbani rushed to the scene along with members of the victorious opposition alliance. The minister told reporters it's an attempt to hit unity and national reconciliation after the holding of free and democratic elections and vowed not to be cowed. Newly elected opposition MP Ammar al-Houri accused, in his words, everybody who is against the stability of Lebanon and the establishment of a democratic system and peaceful cohabitation. He said the bombing bore the same hallmarks as the blast which killed Kassir. Another leader of the communists blamed Israel for the blast. Khalid Hadaidi accused Israel's intelligence for the blast, citing George Hawi's record is resisting Israel's occupation of Lebanon. The blast came after a 3-week respite in a spate of bombings that has hit Beirut, most notably the February 14th attack that killed the late Hariri. His killing plunged Lebanon into political turmoil, but ultimately forced the withdrawal of Syrian troops in April after a near 3-decade military presence. Newly elected MP Ilyas Attallah, an ally of murdered journalist Kassir, accused a collapsing intelligence regime of carrying out the latest assassination. He said the new government, which took office following Syria's pullout, did not have enough time to restructure intelligence and security services and called for their urgent overhaul.
Head of the future parliamentary bloc, MP Saad Rafiq al-Hariri, strongly condemned the terrorist attack that killed the former Secretary General of the Communist Party. He said in a statement, the attack was part of a series of assassinations targeting top officials and national academics, beginning with the attempt on the life of MP Marwan Hamadi and reaching its peak when the slain Prime Minister Rafiq al-Hariri, MP Basil Fulayhan, and their companions were murdered in February, in addition to the assassination of journalist Samir al-Qasir. MP Hariri said the latest assassination aimed at annulling the victory of the Lebanese in legislative elections and the bid by those harmed to attack this achievement. MP Hariri had earlier met French President Jacques Chirac in Paris. The French presidency said discussions focused on changes underway in Lebanon following the election. Parliament and the government have already resigned in Beirut. Contacts are underway to hold the first legislative session next week and elect a speaker. Parliament must also nominate a prime minister to form a new government to replace that of Prime Minister Najib Mikati.
The opposition alliance swept all 28 seats up for grabs in Sunday's decisive final round of the 4-stage elections, ushering in the first legislature not controlled by pro-Damascus factions since the end of the 1975 to 1990 civil war. Hariri's alliance now controls 72 of the 128 seats in parliament, compared to 35 for the alliance led by Shiite factions Amal and Hezbollah and 21 for an unlikely alliance between Christian opposition General Michel Aoun and longtime friends of Damascus. The new balance of power will allow Hariri to take the premiership if he chooses, but he said he first wanted to try to win over his defeated rivals. Aoun already ruled out any possibility of joining a Hariri-led government, accusing his rivals of vote buying and pledging to go into opposition, but there was no immediate word from the Shiite alliance. The clean sweep in the final round in North Lebanon was a major coup for Hariri, following an unexpected rout by Aoun and his allies in the previous phase. Hariri will also need to face continuing US-led international pressure for the disarmament of Hezbollah military wing, which still patrols the south to the exclusion of the Lebanese army 5 years after Israeli troops withdrew. During the campaign, Hariri, who made some electoral deals with Hezbollah, spoke out strongly in favor of the resistance, in contrast to Aoun, who argued his fighters should be disarmed in accordance with the last September's UN resolution. An early indication on whether the shape of parliament blocks will withstand the complexities of Lebanese politics and sectarian tension comes this week when the new assembly meets to elect a speaker, a Shiite by tradition. Amal Chief Nabih Berri, who has served as speaker for the past 13 years, is favored to win re-election. His alliance with Hezbollah swept the Shiite vote.
MP Hariri pledged sweeping reforms after his alliance won control of parliament in the first elections for 3 decades without Syrian troops in Lebanon. Official results for Sunday's final phase of elections in northern Lebanon showed the bloc led by Hariri, the son of the slain former Premier Rafik al-Hariri, winning all 28 remaining seats, taking its overall total to 72 in the 128-member assembly. Hariri said people had voted for change and dedicated his victory to his late father.
Saad Hariri told a news conference that he would issue next week a comprehensive program based on the late Prime Minister's ideas, including administrative and financial reforms, anti-corruption measures, and economic development and social programs. Sunday's win makes Hariri a leading candidate for the post of Prime Minister. He brushed aside questions on future political moves, saying he wanted to consult with his allies first. The anti-Syrian list squared off against an unlikely alliance of pro-Syrians and Michel Aoun, a Maronite Christian and longtime critic of Damascus. Aoun's victory in the Christian heartland of Mount Lebanon in last week's round stunned the movement, whose street protests following Hariri's assassination on February 14th forced Syria to bow to global pressure and pull out of Lebanon. Hariri's bloc has now won 72 seats, an absolute majority, but short of the two-thirds of the anti-Syrian front had predicted. Hariri vowed to meet popular desire for change and to end what he said was widespread skepticism in Lebanon about the possibilities of genuine reform. Hariri's bloc does not have the two-thirds majority required to unseat under fire pro-Syrian President Emil Lahoud, but Hariri said in any case he wanted to move cautiously and consult with allies and the Maronite Church, describing the issue as sensitive.
You have a clear political and economic program that you will propose in parliament and possibly as the next prime minister or in government?
Of course, we have an economical program. We are following the footsteps that my father has begun. His political program and his economical program is to have a country where it has a legal system that is free. It has that we need to have growth. In order to have growth, we need to change a lot of laws in parliament. So there is a final program that's going to be ready within a week, and that will continue what my father started.
الرئيس اللبناني إميل لاحود ورئيس مجلس النواب. The Lebanese President Emil Lahoud, the Speaker of the House Nabih Berri, and Prime Minister Najib Mikati described the criminal assassination of Hawi as a new chapter in a series of plots that target Lebanon and its national unity. They indicated that this crime is among a series targeting the resistance, its weapons, and its know-how. In a statement, Hezbollah denounced this crime, saying that this crime aims at renewing the climate of tension and concern, losing the work of internal order, and hit security and stability in Lebanon.
The commander of the border guards confirmed that Syria has taken every possible measure in order to protect its border with Iraq and has begun all forms of cooperation in order to do this. Military experts who participated in this patrol gave these measures primary importance, saying that it enforces security. The Syrian official statement came as a number of diplomats, military experts, and the press toward the Syrian-Iraqi border.
نظمت وزارة الخارجية بالتعاون مع وزارة الإعلام جولة لبعض الدبلوماسيين.
The Ministry of Foreign Affairs, in cooperation with the Ministry of Information, organized some diplomats, foreign and Arab military, and media experts working in Damascus a tour of the measures and steps being taken on the ground by Syria in the framework of doing everything possible in order to protect the Syrian-Iraqi border. Along the Syrian-Iraqi border, which is 750 kilometers long, there is a dirt barrier that is nearly 4 meters high, as well as wire fences and cement blocks, in addition to 7,000 soldiers who are deployed at 547 stations. They monitor, guard, and ambush within an hour in order to prevent smugglers and infiltrators from crossing the border.
In reality, there are individual attempts to infiltrate Iraq. These attempts are being strongly suppressed and prevented. Those caught are being sent to the security forces.
The commander of the border guards revealed that these forces have arrested 1,200 infiltrators.
1,200 infiltrators tried to cross. We arrested them and took them to security forces where they were interrogated.
Amidst these large security measures being taken by Syria, despite its limited abilities to cover the long border due to the lack of advanced technology, a question arises. What security measures are being taken by those on the other side of the border? And what is the level of cooperation being offered in order to secure the borders? Such questions remain unanswered, especially when considering that the United States has the needed advanced technology.
Let's be honest with everyone. Protecting the borders 100% is impossible. If the other side is saying that we are unable to protect the borders, then why aren't they able to, since they possess high technology, night vision, ground radar, helicopters that can fly at night, or even through the planes that fly over the area night and day?
The survey clarified in a major way the truth about the security measures that Syria is taking. These measures refute the accusations against Syria that it's not taking enough measures to secure these borders. The military experts who participated in this tour said this.
The border is fine. I saw the security measures that Syria is taking. It can take additional measures. We had promised to provide Syria with night vision equipment. However, we can't because of the British elections. The issue is not yet resolved.
A quieter part of the border.
At the end of the military operation in Karabla, near the Qum in west of Iraq, the American occupation forces revealed the amount of damage to the area amidst calls by the residents to expedite food and aid and the burial of the dead.
With the launch of a new attack dubbed Operation Spear in Fallujah, the American occupation forces announced the end of the so-called Operation Arrow in Karabla, near Qa'im in western Iraq. They called it a victory, saying that they found 3 car bomb factories, some cars as well as weapons, arresting and killing dozens of armed men. The images coming out of the area, the statistics given by the Islamic Iraqi Party, and the eyewitness confirmations indicate that the random land and air bombing, which knocked the area to the ground under the pretext of targeting armed fighters, resulted in the killing of 100 unarmed Iraqis and the wounding of 150 others, most of whom were children. Dozens of houses were destroyed while the residents were still inside. A medical center and 3 schools were completely destroyed. Also, there was not enough equipment to remove the bodies from underneath the rubble.
There are dozens of martyrs and families underneath this rubble. If you notice, there are no trucks or cranes to help us remove these bodies. From this place, I urge all humanitarian and international organizations, doctors and engineers to come here in order to remove the bodies, bury the dead and bring water and medicine, as well as treat the wounded.
Although a number of ambulances, fire engines, and bulldozers reached the area, the residents tried to remove the rubble with their hands, looking for their relatives, only to realize that their efforts came late under the bombing that lasted 4 days and creating another tragedy: refugees.
We are residents from Karabla. We came as refugees to a school in the Saara area. We returned to the Karabla, but they told us there is nothing left, and the bombing was still going on.
Iraqi citizens are very concerned about the renewed bloodshed in Fallujah and elsewhere within the framework of the Spears and Arrows military operation. Using the justification of ending the killing, they in reality create more killing.
Iraqis in Baghdad and neighboring municipalities expressed their resentment of the ongoing violence, calling on the government to punish terrorists to the fullest extent of the law. In a survey conducted by Al-Iraqiyya, the people demanded that not only the terrorists must be dealt with swiftly, but also anyone who incites violence or harbors terrorists. It is easy to say that the globalization untied the historical attachments between the nations of the Middle East. Some Arab youth are not impressed by cultural differences in Cairo or Beirut. They are misguided by militants and Arab nationalists, and they are being recruited and sent on suicide missions in Iraq.
I believe that those terrorists are misguided by some militants, Arab nationalists and freedom fighters. They are misled by slogans such as jihad and resistance against occupiers and atheists. Such incitement to violence is done by citing verses from the Holy Quran and from the book of the prophetic sayings, which are being fabricated in different ways to brainwash those youths and misguide them.
Some Iraqi citizens expressed their sorrow towards the Arab suicide bombers and the people who are harboring terrorists.
We are starting from point zero, okay? Whoever wants to blow himself is a Sudanese, meaning he is an Arab. The suicide bomber is a Syrian. During the former regime of Saddam, nobody could cross into Iraq because they were benefiting financially from the previous government. We live at the worst stage of our lives, and they are standing by while looking at the Iraqi people as victims ready to be sacrificed at the slaughterhouse.
Some analysts on Iraqi affairs believe that the objective behind the suicide missions is the financial benefits gained by those who are planning, inciting, and supporting such violent operations.
The fact of the matter is, those terrorist organizations are really benefiting financially from such activities. They are recruiting people who are naive and fooled by silly beliefs that are being advocated by some outside intelligence sources to sabotage and undermine the civil and political movement in Iraq.
Despite the intensive security efforts made in countries where suicide bombers come from, this did not stop the spread of terrorist organizations in these countries. The majority of observers confirm that the reason behind suicide bombers blowing themselves up in Iraq is because they lost hope in their own countries and washed their hands from any opportunity of political reform or change.
A U.S. soldier was killed in a bomb explosion in western Iraq as insurgent attacks continue to target U.S. and Iraqi forces. But U.S. Marines claimed success in another battle against insurgents in Iraqi desert, but acknowledged war is far from over and that guerrillas will soon move back onto lost ground. Dan Ramadan has more.
Violent attacks against U.S. and Iraqi security forces continue across Iraq. An improvised explosive device went off in northeastern Baghdad, causing some material damage to a footbridge. The device, which apparently targeted a U.S. military convoy, exploded after the convoy passed on the Canal Highway. The blast destroyed part of the bridge, but no casualties were reported. Yesterday, dozens of Iraqis held a sit-in protest at Baghdad Fardos Square, calling for the withdrawal of multinational troops from the country. The protesters also condemned the Iraqi government decision to ask the United Nations Security Council to extend the presence of these troops. At least 2 Iraqi parliament members joined the protest. Also yesterday, a suicide car bomber ripped through a convoy carrying a Kurdish town's security director, killing him and 3 bodyguards. Meanwhile, Iraq's Sunni Muslim clerics condemned a military assault in the western town of Karabila, calling it a new massacre as U.S. Marines claimed success in their latest battle against insurgents. About 1,000 U.S. and Iraqi forces backed by battle tanks launched Operation Spear on Friday in the desert wastes around Karabila and Qim. U.S. Marine commanders said 45 to 50 insurgents and 1 Marine were killed over 4 days of Operation Spear. The Cleric Association says that a number of civilians were killed, including women and children. After 4 days of bombardments and street-to-street gun battles, the Marines said they cleared Karabila of foreign fighters who made it a base. Local residents in the ruined town said the insurgents will be back. To help the displaced residents of Karabila, the Iraqi Red Crescent Society sent relief supplies to the desert areas. On the other side of the border, Syria's border guard officials organized a tour for journalists and Western diplomats yesterday to see the recently constructed fortifications along the 650-kilometer Syrian-Iraqi border to bolster defenses against infiltrators and refute U.S. military accusations that Damascus was allowing militants passage to Iraq. The Tanaf border crossing with Iraq, one of the 3 major border posts around 250 kilometers east of Damascus, is heavily used with a long queue of lorries carrying goods into Iraq. Syrian officials say the U.S. military hold up the traffic on the Iraqi side for security screening. The government also filled up desert stormwater valleys or wadis with cement blocks and barbed wire to prevent smugglers and infiltrators. However, the region shown to journalists was not the most vulnerable to insurgent crossing, said Colonel Julian Lintirkis, a defense attaché from the British Embassy in Damascus who has surveyed the entire length of the border.
In recent months, the Syrians have been working hard to improve the border. They've been increasing the size and improving the sand berm. We are very grateful to the Syrians for inviting us to come and have a look at the border, to show us what they've been doing. I've been up on the border several times. The last time was about 6 months ago, so I'd be very interested to see what changes have taken place since I was last year. But we are encouraged by the Syrians inviting us to come and have a look at the border, and we want to continue to have a dialogue with them about the border and that the problems involved on both sides, on the Syrian side and on the Iraqi side.
On the diplomatic front, Iraqi President Jalal Talbani received the credentials of newly appointed U.S. ambassador to Iraq, Zalmay Khalilzad. Khalilzad, an Afghan-American, was the U.S. ambassador to Afghanistan, where he oversaw elections and reconstruction. He is replacing John Negroponte. Khalilzad has also been an aide to Defense Secretary Donald Rumsfeld and a consultant for U.S. oil company Unocal Corp.
The views expressed on MOSAIC are not those of Link TV or its sponsors, but of the broadcasters themselves. MOSAIC is made possible by a grant from the John S. and James L. Knight Foundation, which promotes journalism excellence worldwide and invests in the vitality of 26 U.S. communities, and the William and Flora Hewlett Foundation. Additional support is provided by the Firedoll Foundation and Henry and Virgilia Dakin.